looked at using our tongue for the recitation of the Quran and also for sending salutations to the beloved Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The third way of utilizing our tongue properly is extremely beneficial for ourselves. And despite it being a personal thing that you're doing, it's actually considered ibadah in Allah. And that is to making a habit of supplicating and doing dua to Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal. And I say it's personal because when we make dua, the dua is about ourselves. It's beneficial. So we're asking Allah for something, whether it's in the dunya or the akhirah. When we ask Allah, we're asking for us, ourselves. And that is the reason behind dua of why we raise our hands. Is Allah, I have this need, and I'm going to Allah for that personal need. But despite it being a personal need that you are beseeching Allah for, it's actually considered ibadah as well. So there are two ways of looking at this. One is that I have something that I want from Allah, so I'm going to ask it. And at the same time, despite it being me asking Allah for something that I want for myself, Allah is actually rewarding me for it. Allah is actually giving me reward for that, for asking for my own benefit. And it's a very unique thing, this concept of dua. Unlike asking from people, where even the most generous of people, they over time get tired. If you ask them once, you ask them twice, you ask them 3 times, and then it becomes almost burdensome for them that, how many times are you going to ask me? And with Allah, it actually works the opposite way, that Allah likes it the more you ask Him. So the more you ask Allah, the more Allah appreciates that and likes that. It's actually something that He demands from us. That from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Allah, and the reason behind why Allah likes it so much is that it's an acknowledgement of dependency. When we ask Allah over and over and over, we're in essence saying to Allah that without your help I can't do anything. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, even of the most mundane of matters, he instructed us that before you turn to anybody else, turn to Allah. That in one riwayat of Tirmidhi, the Prophet ﷺ said that Salillah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything, hatta, even if your shoelace breaks and you need to replace that, then ask Allah first. Now why? Because this is a sign of being completely dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what Allah demands from the creation is show independence from the rest of creation and show complete dependency on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His characteristics, is Allahu Samad. And Samad means the one who's in need of nobody or anything, and everybody and everything is dependent upon Him. So He, Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal, is not in need and in assistance of any person nor of anything. So Allah needs, for example, لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. Allah doesn't need to nap or have a lengthy sleep. He doesn't need that. There is nothing that Allah depends upon in terms of person or in terms of thing. And on the flip side, everybody is dependent on Allah. Everything is dependent upon Allah. No drop of water from the heavens rains down without the permission of Allah. There is nothing that happens on the face of this earth without the permission of Allah. The sun rises and the sun sets with the permission of Allah. Every function of what happens around us is dependent on Allah giving the permission. And so the more you beseech Allah, the more you are saying to Allah that Allah, I need you. And this is what Allah wants from us. Allah wants us to show to Him that for everything I need you, Ya Allah. And because of this being a trait of a believer, the Prophet ﷺ, he displayed this at every junction, wherever, if you analyze the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and if you dissect it, almost at every step that a person takes in the day, where he transitions from one thing to another, there's a dua incorporated into it. You wake up in the morning, there's a dua. You go to the toilet, there's a dua. You put clothes on, there's a dua. You sit down to eat, there's a dua. If it's a specific drink, if you're drinking milk, there's a dua. If you drink water, there's a dua afterwards. Every sort of movement, you leave the house, there's a dua. The protection duas of the morning, then throughout the entire day, every facet of your life, there's a dua. What's the hikmah behind that dua? To constantly show Allah that we are dependent upon Him. Constantly. And acknowledge and then embed that in your life. Have that as a belief in your heart that I can't function, I can't do anything, nothing happens without the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah, like I said, unlike our relationships in the world where we can become burdensome on somebody by asking too often, and they may, start to question the frequency of our asking. Allah is the opposite. Allah loves it when you ask Him. Allah absolutely, this is something that not just the love, Allah wants this from His creation. That I want you to ask me more and more and more. Now why is the difference? Why is there a difference from someone in the world and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because no matter who you are in the world, whatever you possess has a limit. You can be the richest person in the world, but that still has an end. It's not limitless. It might seem limitless. It might seem so much in our eyes that, this guy will never run short, or this person will never run short. But in essence, it is limited. It has a number fixed to it, as big as that number may be. And so a person, when they give, it's a natural thing to think that from my possession, something has gone away. No matter how much I have. For others it may be insignificant. For that person it may also be insignificant, the amount. But it's still something that decreases from their total of what they have. Whilst Allah's treasures are unlimited. They're infinite. And so no matter how much Allah gives, no matter how frequently Allah gives, no matter how many people He gives to, nothing changes from the treasures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why there is no Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it makes no difference. And so He implores the people, ask me more, ask me more, ask me more. Don't ever think that I can ask for too much from Allah. Never have that mindset. No matter how much you ask from Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more than capable of giving that and much, much more. To the extent that we have limits to what we're able to possess, Allah has no limit to what He can give. And so using the tongue in a positive manner, spend as much time in the remembrance of Allah, i.e. in making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We all have needs. We all have ultimate needs. One is the needs of this dunya, which we do have, and desires that we have, but ultimately we have the need of the akhirah. Ultimately, there is tremendous there was a lot at stake in terms of the akhirah. And so, frequenting dua, making that plea to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is vital, both for this dunya and the akhirah. And number two, never become despondent with your dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't ever think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not listening to my call. We read in the story of Yusuf ala nabiyina alayhi salatu wassalam and Sayyidina Yaqub ala nabiyina alayhi salatu wassalam, which is mentioned in the Quran in Surah Yusuf, that when his sons come back after going on this trip with Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam and throwing him in the well, and they bring this fake blood, the blood of a wolf, on the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam and present it to his father. From that point, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, he makes a statement that I will exercise patience. وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانُ وَلَا مَا تَصِفُونَ, and Allah will be my assistance in this matter. How many years does he wait? How many du'as did he make to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How many times it's mentioned in the Quran, قالوا تالله تفتأ تذكر يوسف حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين. That the sons, they plead with their father that stop this remorse of your loss of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, otherwise you'll end up killing yourself. So how many du'as must he have made? And why does Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam say, اذهبوا بقميصي هذا فألقوه على وجه أبي يأتي بصيرا, that take this shirt of mine, go back to my father and put it on his face, his eyesight will return. Why does he make this statement? Because he cried and cried in front of Allah until he lost his eyesight. But he never gave up that plea to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Years passed by, decades, but Allah answers the call. So never become despondent with our asking. And what that story teaches us, that at times Allah's response is not immediate. If He makes His Prophet Yaqub ala nabiyina alayhi salatu wasalam wait for decades, then why do we expect an immediate response from Allah? Why do we turn around after 2 days and say, Ya Allah, I've woken up for 2 days in tahajjud and asked you and you've not answered me yet? If a Prophet of Allah has to wait for decades, then don't demand an immediate response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thirdly, the fuqaha, they write that even if Allah doesn't respond to your call in this world with your demand of what you want and your plea of what you want, don't think that the dua itself has gone unnoticed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't think that the dua has gone unnoticed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For as I've already mentioned, dua is actually a form of ibadah. So the reward of that dua you will then see in the hereafter. So in any angle that you take, whichever perspective you look for, the dua is something that has not gone in vain. It's not wasted. Irrespective of whether you see its results immediately or not, understand that this dua, if not here, it's becoming a treasure for me in the hereafter. So at no junction and at no point should a person become despondent from asking Allah. Continue to ask Allah and continue to ask Allah. And as the Prophet ﷺ commanded us, ask Him and demand from Him from the most mundane of things, from the most trivial of things. Show Allah your dependency upon Him. Show Allah that you are completely dependent upon Him for everything and anything. And dua, finally, though there are adab of dua, And there are etiquettes of dua. The ulama, they write facing the qibla, sitting down, etc. There are no stipulations of dua. There are no shara'it of dua. Adab are separate. If you're in a place, in fact, the ulama, they write that wherever you are, as long as suitable places, but wherever you are, in the car, driving, sitting at home, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whenever you can. Speak to Allah. And the prophetic du'as of Allah, of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where he's made specific du'as at specific junctions, make it a habit to embed them in your life. They're very simple. Very seldom does the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam have a lengthy du'a for a situation. Most of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam's du'as are short, extremely short. And so develop that habit. Learn. If you don't know, pick up a child's dua book, honestly. There is no shame in learning. You don't have to pick up Bukhari to learn. Pick up a child's dua book, and if you haven't learned, then learn the injunctions. Where the Prophet said what? What were these du'as that he made? And embed them in your life. Embed them in your life, and by default that becomes embedded in your children's life, and your family, your household's life. Simple things. Like I said, from the time that we wake up in the morning till when we go to sleep at night, there are numerous, dozens and dozens of dua that the Prophet ﷺ recited throughout the day. And it should be part of our life as well. That we remember those instances where the Prophet ﷺ made these du'as, and if the Prophet ﷺ saw it beneficial for him to recite it, if the Prophet ﷺ saw that those du'as were beneficial for himself, then more than the Prophet ﷺ were in need of those du'as and the benefit of those du'as, inshallah. So use your tongue for making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, supplicating to Allah, presenting your needs before Allah, presenting your desires before Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer that in one way or another. Allah give me the tawfiq. Allah give all of you the tawfiq. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحان الله بحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.